Well, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Industrial Real Estate Show. I'm very excited to have a good friend of mine on the show who is also the executive director for my local NAIOP chapter. And I've mentioned NAIOP a number of times on this channel, and it's something that I not just think that you'd get value in yourself, but I've been a member for a number of years. I even served on the local board for a while. So I'm a big advocate of NAIOP, and there's a reason that I highly recommend it, because again, I think that there's a lot of value that it offers. So, Anand is the president of the local chapter, really smart guy, really intelligent, really good insight into the industry in general. So we're gonna talk all things, this might sound a little bit like a commercial for NAIOP because I am a big fan of it. I'm not getting paid by NAIOP. It's just something that I personally recommend and do myself. So I apologize if this does come across as a little bit of a commercial. I just really want to emphasize some of the key parts about it. But we're also going to dive into it a little bit deeper about the power of belonging to an organization, some of the advocacy things that NAIOP does on behalf of the members, and really just have a chat about that in general. So with that introduction out of the way, pleased to be joined by Anand. Anand, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Chad.
Well, we should have probably just actually done this in person and had a beer or something with it, but here we are. We'll just have to do it virtually.
No, I just wanted to see that great background again. That's perfect. But yeah, we're both in Edmonton and have known each other for a long time.
Yeah, and we both, one thing that we probably will always share is our disdain might be too strong of a word, but our concerns, let's use that, will be more diplomatic, our concerns about property taxes. And that's an area that's affected every single jurisdiction in the world is property taxes, not just property taxes themselves, because obviously they go towards important things, but property taxes rising at unsustainable paces. So I do want to talk about that, and we'll group that in under the advocacy part where we talk about that a little bit later. But first, why don't you share your background on how you got into NAIOP, because you were at UDI before, correct?
Yeah.
So maybe if you could just share your background on how you got into the real estate industry and then what brought you to NAIOP.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like everybody, I got into the real estate industry a bit by accident. I was working in nonprofits and saw an opportunity at UDI. Actually, I had finished university and I started working at a company here, Finning, for like a couple of weeks, and I'd been interviewing at a bunch of places, and UDI called me and they offered me a lot less money. And I shouldn't have mentioned Finning now, I'm going to say, but they offered me a lot less money, and I said, now I like it here. I think I'll stick around. And they just talked about the opportunity to be a part of the way that the city was built, and somewhere between politics and all of the folks who were moving and shaking in Edmonton at the time. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, I said, we really got to get a bit closer on the money. And they said, hey, we're going to spend $10,000 on making a new website. Can you do that? You're pretty young. And I said, oh yeah, I'll do that. That sounds good. That gets it kind of close. Then great. And I walked back in, and I had to quit my job that day because I had to learn to make websites. And so that was my kind of then I was in the real estate advocacy sort of sphere, which I've stayed in for my whole career. About 5 years into that, I was working on a way to make it so that you could make a new industrial areas, which the city wanted to be shovel ready. They wanted to make sure that developers were had serviced the land, but were just sort of waiting with ready land in Edmonton. And the upfront infrastructure cost of that was prohibitive to developers. And so we're working on this structure where the developer could be paid back by the tax uplift of the development itself. So like tax increment financing for the real nerds in the audience. But we were saying, you can actually bank on tax increment financing, unlike being paid back by other developers in the area that might be using the same infrastructure, which you kind of can't take to the bank. It was a really complicated project, and so Colin Klisch with Remington at that time said, don't do that off the side of your desk. Come and do that with NAIOP. NAIOP works specifically on commercial real estate development policy, and so I came over to NAIOP, and that was about 6 years ago. I haven't looked back since, and it was great. We got that policy through, and now we're working on. In fact, now we're working on a new industrial action plan around here, which means that I've survived long enough that even the policies that I thought were brilliant 6 years ago are coming up for renewal. So it's exciting times. We're doing lots in the market.
Yeah, and it shows. I mean, as I've said at the beginning, I'm a big fan of NAIOP as an organization. I'm a big fan of what you've done in the local market. NAIOP is big. I believe it's over 20,000 members, 52 chapters, if I'm not mistaken, all in North America. There's nothing outside of Canada and the US, correct?
Yeah, just Canada and the US.
Okay. And NAIOP used to be an acronym that stood for National Association of Industrial and Office Properties. And somewhere in the last 5 to 10 years, they decided to get away from that acronym because they wanted to be more focused on commercial real estate development more broadly. And I think the majority of it is still industrial, office, or mixed use developments. But the acronym's no longer there. It's just a commercial real estate development organization, if I'm correct.
Yeah. And I mean, like, as you say there, it's the industry is so much more. We wouldn't have said it was about retail in maybe the 80s. But that's a big part of our membership in a lot of NAIOP chapters. And then now mixed use, right? Where retail owners are adding a tower to the side of the project is a bigger part of the industry than it was then, at least in Canada. And so it made sense to drop the acronym. My first week at NAIOP, I did an interview with the local paper here, and the first question was, what does it stand for? And so the first thing I said on the record, and I said it like maybe 5 times, I said, like, no, it doesn't stand for anything. And she goes, like, so the association doesn't stand for anything? I go, no, okay, we've got to start again. It does stand for something. It used to anyways, so we have fun with it. But yeah, it now represents investors, developers, brokers, and in all asset classes of commercial real estate.
Yeah, it's funny how, because it doesn't roll off the tongue, NAIOP, like but there is that name behind it and the history, because it goes back quite a long time.
We'll say it so many times on this podcast that we'll never be able to change the name. Now it'll be too well known.
It'll be enshrined in history. We had a couple of questions actually come in, which maybe we could just tackle right away. Estimating 1, discovering 3. It's a great name. Are there chapters in upstate New York? I'm on the tax grievance board, but I'm also looking to buy a local warehouse. So
yeah, actually, we're
on the spot to all 52 locations, because I think there's another question that came in about another one too.
Yeah, there are NAIOP chapters in every state. I know I have a session actually. We're going down to Washington D.C. Because NAIOP nationally in the States does a lot of advocacy, and so we're down in DC next week. It's a great thing. The NAIOP chapters all kind of learn from each other about the advocacy work and other kinds of work that we're doing through each chapter. So I know there's a NAIOP New York chapter, New York City chapter, and I would have to just take a look yes, there is a NAIOP upstate New York chapter specifically. So yeah, check them out. A lot about property taxes from those folks.
Yeah, and I know that when I was on the board, it was a while ago, so I'm not nearly as familiar with all the intricacies as I was. Still a very proud member, and I support it whenever I can, but I don't remember everything. But I recall that there was 3 main pillars that NAIOP goes for, and you'll have to fill in the gaps: education,
and networking. We do education. We host a case study competition with students from universities around Western Canada, as well as some other kinds of education for folks who are like, you can go to NAIOP.org and find like really specific micro credentials for things like introductory leasing all the way up to advanced finance for major projects. Then we have advocacy, which I think we'll talk a lot about, and then we have events. So education, advocacy, and events are the three sides of the organization.
And yeah, like you said, each local chapter will have their own education, in-person education, and events. But NAIOP.org, there's some great courses on there. And there's even some good publications you can get. There was one that I purchased a couple of years ago, everything to do with warehouse loading. So everything you could think about is written by an architectural firm called HPA. And I still have that as a reference guide. The one stat that I put on Twitter the other day is that HPA, coincidentally, I got it from this book. They determined that, and they used computer software to completely calculate the worst case scenario on how much depth should be in a distribution center. And they determined that if you've got stacked 53-foot container or trucks and you're trying to back another one in, the swing area or marshalling area that truck needs, is the optimal area is 131 feet. So what we see in a lot of new developments is some developers will either round it down to 130 or round it up to 135. But that came right from that book. So it's a great resource. That's one of the reasons I just speak so highly of NAIOP, is there's not a lot of education out there for industrial real estate. And I've found NAIOP to be the best one. There's other ones there's books out there that are good, but in terms of all around practical information, I've just found NAIOP to be hugely beneficial. There was one more question, and I'll get to the follow-up question that he had, Wyatt, if you don't mind just pulling up. There was one from earlier, warehouse investor. Are there chapters in Texas? I'm sure that there are chapters in Texas. Do you know, are there multiple ones, or is it just for Texas?
There's a North Texas. There's a new chapter. The newest chapter is in Austin. I think just launched in the past year, which is a major kind of push by our corporate office to make sure that we had an Austin chapter because of the huge development potential there. Yeah, there's a North Texas chapter, and then that would lead me to believe that there is a South Texas chapter. I just can't see it here right off the hop. So it might be that it's Fort Worth as its own thing, but all that to say, there's definitely at least a couple chapters in Texas, and a chapter in I believe every state. So
it's just on a tangent about Texas. I was just reading last night. I made a short video about it. Tesla's going crazy in Texas right now. Ever since they left California, they did the Gigafactory in Austin. They just applied for a $750 million extension to build 4 more buildings on that site. And it's huge. I drove by it a few months ago, and it is bigger than any building I've ever seen in my life.
Didn't you do a video of it?
I did. Yeah, it was crazy. We were driving 50, 60 miles an hour, and it still took a full minute just to go past the building. It was wild. And then the other news that just came out is that they just leased a 1 million square foot building in Houston, and it's a distribution center. So I don't know if it's just going to be for parts or what they're going to use it for, but they've gone from having very little presence in Texas to now that's being like their hub for everything industrial real estate related. So Texas is definitely an interesting market right now.
It's really interesting to me from the NAIOP side of it, because there's not that many associations. So much of the development advocacy happens at the local level. If you're interested in your property taxes, you're probably going to talk to your municipality. If you're interested in garbage pickup or whatever, it's a lot of advocacy at the local level. But it's all common issues. Everybody's dealing with issues downtown. Everybody's dealing with issues of economic development, and it just made me think what you're saying about what we've learned from the States in Canada about how well the States is doing economic development in terms of new industrial facilities. There's tax incentives, for better or worse. There's tax incentives, but there's also this full court press. I feel like from like the political level all the way through to the administrative level, and so sometimes we have an advantage because it's maybe less complicated here. But I do feel like there's lots of things that we can kind of steal from each other, and we're doing that. Like I said, in a few weeks here down in DC, the folks talk about some wins and some of the things that they're excited about, and then we go, okay, well, how can we replicate that somewhere else in a place that's interested in doing it, but just needs some examples of like, how did that happen in Texas, and then hopefully we're the next spot for something like that.
Yeah, another perfect example of why there's power in NAIOP is that you're connected with all these major markets throughout North America. You're going to get some best practices on what's working in other areas, so you can incorporate it in your own local market. One point, and there's another. Just hold that other question for a second. The follow-up question, Wyatt. One point that I'd recommend to anybody that's considering NAIOP, and I can't emphasize this enough, is if you are going to go and check out NAIOP, and you can go to some of the local luncheons without being a member. They'll be happy to just have you be a guest, and you could pay the rate to be a guest at the luncheon or whatever event that they have, and you could check them out. If you do decide to join, I would highly encourage you to become involved with either a committee or perhaps even running for the board if that's of interest to you. I was involved at the committee level and at the board level, and the quality relationships that I built with yourself and other people in the organization came from that, being more in a tightly knit group as opposed to being at a luncheon with 100 people, which is still great. You have an opportunity to meet a whole bunch of people that you wouldn't have otherwise met, but you're building some very strong relationships when people see you rolling up your sleeves, putting in some volunteer effort to help progress either the organization or the industry. It's the ultimate selfless act of doing something to help another group or someone else do it, and people notice that. They notice if you put work in and if you're actually diligently trying to do it. So I'm sure you would echo that, Anand, but I would really highly recommend, and that goes for any organization, whether it's NAIOP or you're joining a local Rotary Club or a Toastmaster Club or whatever it is, you'll find much more benefit if you actually are helping the organization go forward. So that I don't want to belabor that point because I feel like I've already belabored the value of NAIOP and oversold that. But I also want to oversell just the value of committing to something beyond just being a member and hope that that's going to get business. You've been 6 years now, and you and I have known each other since you started. What have you seen, or what have you heard? What have people said that they really enjoy about NAIOP, or where they found value in NAIOP? Again, I don't want to. I know this is teetering on the cusp of being a full-on infomercial, but I really do just want to drive this point home. What have you heard?
It's such a great point. I was thinking I better just ask you for a recording of this so that I can play it at our next lunch or something. But no, honestly, is a great question. I agree with you. I think that especially since the pandemic, people are interested in deeper connections to their, it's not, it's even less worthwhile to go and exchange 100 business cards, right? It's the follow-up. It's the next thing that makes that valuable. And so I feel like NAIOP has that, ability, because we've got a real focus on the development side especially through our advocacy work. And so what I think a lot of people say is, especially in a smaller market like where we are, but anywhere, is that people have the opportunity to talk to investors and developers, and that opportunity doesn't always come around. And it was made in a way where it wasn't like it wasn't a speed networking kind of a, uh, sort of an event where it's like very superficial. There's a genuine community here, and you can actually get to know people, and hopefully those relationships. I mean, I think about the people who were on the board at the time that you were on the board, Chad, and the amount of directions that everybody's gone in, and just how people's careers have progressed is great, because you could go back and see those same people again 6 years later and go, wow, this is like, we've really made names for ourselves in different areas. And so we hope to kind of build that up all the way from university through our developing leaders program, which is the under 35 crowd, which I think is where we get a lot of feedback from people who say that was like, being in a room with 20 people and having a conversation with one person who's a CEO for an hour and a half, which we do. It's called 20 questions. It's like a lunch with an industry titan. My second day at NAIOP, we had a 20 questions event with Bob Black, who was the architect of our local arena deal, or one of them. And I thought, what is this opportunity? This is incredible. 20 people, and we get to, at the end, he knew everybody's name, and and we still work together on things, and I met him through that. So that's definitely the advantage, is to kind of create those deeper connections. And I hope that we, as an association, give lots of people opportunities to do that.
Yeah, that developing leader program is great. And it's an initiative that I think more organizations really should embark upon. I remember when I started in the industry back in 2005, and I joined a Rotary Club, just trying to give back to the community. I know that they're very active in different things. And I was the youngest person there by like 2 generations. I was the grandkids age of most of the members that were there. And it felt really off-putting that I just couldn't relate or connect with the members, because we had very little in common. I was new into my career, and I was young, and a lot of the guys were retired and looking to move into just that service element of their lives. And it was very hard to connect. Whereas NAIOP, that developing leader program, and Drew in my office has been out to a number of events. He speaks very highly of it. It's an opportunity to meet with a bunch of other people that are in the same stage of career. And I think that is a huge benefit. And I really do think other organizations should take a chapter from your playbook and look to do that. So kudos on that. I saw a couple more questions coming in just to about you specifically, estimating 1, discovering 3. You have to just say what that name actually is. I'm curious. You got me curious on that one. And then, what did you go to school for?
Yeah, now we want to know what number 2 is. I went to school for business. I used to be very involved in the theater community, and so I was an actor. And then, but I thought that I would approach that kind of through the business side of things, and so I still volunteer on a local theater board around here, and do that. But yeah, went to business school.
Cool. John joined in, HBA out of Oklahoma, or HBK. I'm not, I'm an acronym guy. I use acronyms for everything. I don't know if I know the HBA or the HBK.
No, I'm not sure.
And I was assuming you might know what those are, so I'll move on.
Okay. No, please clarify on that, and apologize for us not knowing what it is. Maybe it's very obvious and you're rolling your eyes, justifiably so. But if you don't mind filling out that acronym for us, that'd help us out. We're just a couple of Canadians. We're simple guys. Ron joined in. Give a plug to Retweet. This is actually very fascinating, and I don't know if you're active on Twitter or not, but on Twitter, there's a community called #Retweet, and it's gone crazy in the last 6 months, I would say, but even more so coming into 2023. It's basically a number of different professionals, and some of them are anonymous. Some of them, like Ron and myself, it's our profiles on there, and it's just become a really interesting community where a lot of people are just giving their tips or sharing their stories or giving their insights into the market, and it's unlike anything that I've actually found online so far from like a social media standpoint. I'd always looked at LinkedIn as kind of being that business element where that's where people go. I'm actually much more interested in Twitter right now than I am in LinkedIn. So kind of how I'm looking at this is I love YouTube first. I love the ability to have interviews like this and talk face to face. I find this to be my favorite platform. Twitter is becoming number 2 though very quickly. So thanks, Ron, for pointing that out. John, what was the name? Yes, sorry. The name of the architect you mentioned earlier, HPA. And I think that they had, I think it was two last names and then architects, and then being the acronym loving firm like many of us are. NAIOP being one. Even my company was an acronym at one point. They shortened it to HPA. So if you actually look into their portfolio, they've designed a considerable amount of industrial properties. And I'm a big advocate that a good architect can be the difference between that one simple thing. If one architect comes in and they perhaps didn't have a lot of experience in industrial and they recommended that truck court be 120 feet, whereas an architectural firm like HPA that has designed countless amounts, and they say you need to be a minimum of 130, preferably even higher than that to be modern with tradition with new buildings. That could be the difference between having a building that leases for market rates and one that has to be subsidized to attract tenants. So I'm a big believer in that. Thanks for clarifying that for us as well. I was like, how do I not know an industry acronym? I feel I failed already. It's not even half past lunch and I've already failed on the acronym. But
I was hoping you'd edit out you and me going, oh, we don't know about any of that. So.
Both just scratching our heads on that. Okay, so we got NAIOP covered. I check it out, naiop.org. Look into your local chapter. See if you can go to a few events. Check it out. If it's not for you, it's not for you. I've benefited from it a lot in my career, so that's why I recommend it so highly. Let's move on to something that you and I are very fond about, and you and I both spent a lot of time on this advocacy subject. And it's interesting. In our market, the taxes are topic of the day. It's a very prevalent point because they just came out and basically said we're going to see 5% increases for the next 4 years. And I suspect that markets all over the world right now are seeing similar things. We're coming through this pandemic. I'm guessing if other cities are like our city, they've probably spent more than they had available to them over this last 2 to 3 year period. They probably subsidized some things. In our city, they subsidize public transit much more than they previously do. And the chickens are coming home to roost. We're seeing property taxes go up at an alarming rate. And you and I were involved in this 4 years ago in the last budget cycle where they were proposing similar types of increases. And we led a full campaign to try to mitigate those increases from being higher than necessary. And we had some success on it. But now we're seeing that it's without that vocal opposition. Now they're pushing increases higher. What is your stance right now on property taxes being a necessary, I don't even want to call it a necessary evil. They're necessary. Property taxes are necessary because they fund a number of fundamental services, core infrastructure. There's a lot of valuable things that property taxes go to. Where do you see this property tax issue? And you can describe it in like a local context or even more just as a issue that's afflicting property owners and municipalities all over.
No, I think you got it right. I mean, it's not a local issue in the sense that we tackle it locally because that's the decision maker. But I mean, broadly, what's happening really in all levels of government, I think, have expanded throughout the pandemic. I'm not as aware of the context in the States, but what I've seen in Canada is the largest legislation that I'll ever kind of be involved in any way, and our way was very small, was the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy legislation that supported the rent of quite a lot of tenants in Canada during the worst parts of the pandemic. That was a hugely expensive program. So was Canada Wage Subsidy, and it's a result of a federal government that saw an outsized need, but that also views itself as important in the functioning of business. And so that can be good or bad. It's good when new industries are created and sometimes some subsidies can help, like, diversify the economy in a way that couldn't have been done otherwise. But that expanded role of government, I think, is kind of happening at every level, and it happens on the right and the left, in my opinion, both. That's maybe a bit more about our political context, but it's just it doesn't matter whether you're a right-leaning or left-leaning party. All parties are kind of drawn to this idea that they may have more of a role in the economy than previous to the pandemic. How that manifests itself at the municipal level is that I really think that municipalities all over, but especially in our context, see these new challenges as a part of what they want to be doing. So climate change is one where our municipality and the political leadership there feel a deep responsibility municipally to be leaders in tackling climate change. And you can agree or disagree with that, but that it is a fact that they are interested in it, and they're going to put their money where their mouth is, in a sense. Active transportation is another area where we famously spent $100 million on bike lanes in Edmonton, while saying no to a lot of other worthy projects. And I can't litigate whether or not bike lanes, because I use bike lanes and think that they're good. We don't know how that money will exactly be spent. So I'm not saying the bike lanes are good or bad, but active transportation is another area where municipalities are thinking. And then social disorder, which grew during the pandemic in every city, is another area. So housing, mental health, and addictions, those are just areas where municipalities have been asked to step up. And at the same time, as you mentioned, revenues are lower and people's ability to pay is lower. So they're not in a great position. That's not letting anybody off the hook in any way, but that's why I have some, that's why I feel for any politician who's trying to deal with those issues while also doing it on a budget. Our local municipalities require that they pay for, they can't run a deficit. So they have to pay for everything in the year that they incurred the expense. And so if they spend more, then they have to raise taxes. And so they spent more and raised taxes. And they focused on those areas which are kind of emerging areas, which the municipality wasn't, not at all, but like it wasn't as much involved in. Where we come in is we show municipalities the opportunity to reduce existing expenses so that they can spend on new priorities. And for us, new priorities would be to incent the kind of economic development that's going to pay back. It's more than what we put in. So incenting the next industrial building or industrial business park is going to pay itself back in only a few years, depending on the investment, but in a matter of years. Whereas if you build a recreation center, it's going to be more difficult to measure that payback, because it's just kind of like it's going to spend money every year. It's not going to pay taxes. It's a municipal building. So we showed the municipality some opportunities where they could save money so that they could fund the projects that they felt were priorities. We showed them opportunities in middle management, in value engineering, capital projects, and in getting out of lines of business that were already being done by the private sector. So one easy example for us, because we work in real estate, is real estate, where the municipality has a ton of land that they own and have ideas about developing into, maybe the greenest neighborhood or the most socially responsible neighborhood, or they don't have plans, where the private industry has an idea for those areas and says, like, we would build it, and we would build it faster and better. And so there are some lands that have value. So we showed municipalities those ways: value engineering, capital projects, getting rid of bloated middle management, getting rid of some consulting and services that have grown over the years, as well as getting out of lines of business that they, maybe don't have an advantage in. And I think that those messages resonated a little bit with council this time around. And I think that every city will be challenged to really take the cost side of the equation seriously now, going forward, because they've got new priorities. And so you can't just add new priorities. Well, if you do add new priorities, then you're going to raise taxes. And if you but the other way around is you add new priorities and you get rid of some of the old ones, or trim back on some of the old ones, which is how we all do budgets.
Yeah. I want to go a little off tangent from the industrial real estate topic and just dive into one of the points you made, because about homelessness, and that could be a societal issue. There's obviously a mental health issue to it, but that is a problem everywhere right now. I was in Seattle a few months ago, and the homeless problem was really bad. They had security guards outside of shopping centers just because there was mayhem there if they didn't. But we were walking down the street, someone just hucked a bottle across the road and it shattered against a side of a building, and nobody even reacted to it. It just must have been a normal thing that happened from time to time. And I'm sure that there's numerous cities beyond our market or Seattle that are experiencing homelessness problems. You're a deep thinker. You're a smart guy. What's your take on why homelessness is getting worse in light of more money and more attention being given to it?
That's a great question. I can't claim to be an expert on the overall issue of homelessness. We deal with a lot of advocacy for our downtown, and like in other centers, homelessness and mental health and addictions, three separate issues, but that are related often, is concentrated there. And it's concentrated there right next to the economic engine that is going to drive us, for the next decade. We talk a lot about industrial, and there's a ton of opportunity in industrial, but there's also, the knowledge economy, and there's a lot of opportunities for cities as downtowns. And so we come at the problem from that, from that angle at NAIOP, and so I don't want to represent myself as being any kind of expert. It's definitely made worse by the pandemic. I know locally here we see two streams of thought, and I'm going to butcher the exact wording of it, but we see one stream of thought that says that we need to house people first, housing first, which says that it's cold around here, and the circumstance of being homeless is so challenging that it often exacerbates the issues of mental health and addictions, or creates them. And so if we house people, then they can be in a safe place to deal with those other issues. The other side of that coin is a recovery model, and that idea is, should we pay for the houses of people who are addicted to drugs? And the recovery model says, no, people need to be active in their recovery as a condition of the housing that they receive. And I don't know the answer. Those are the two streams of thought that are happening here. What we have advocated for through NAIOP is to say, the problem is bigger than it ever was. Let's spend the money that is available to whoever's spending the money can choose how they would like to administer their programs. Let's spend that money. Let's do it in a hurry, because people are on a day-to-day basis deciding whether or not they go back to the office, or whether they invest in one place or another, or locate their business here. And then let's evaluate the results of those things, because there's a lot of literature written on both sides of that equation. And so we may never get to an exact understanding of it, but the kind of bickering about it has led to paralysis of indecision, in my opinion, even while both municipal and provincial and federal governments know that this is one of the major issues of urban centers of our time. And so we've just said, look, get on with the doing of it, and figure out the exact details later, almost, or figure out the details that you want in your program, and don't ask a lot of questions. Then evaluate your exact program. So that's an incomplete answer, because I work in commercial real estate and not homelessness, but that's at least how we've come to it here locally.
Yeah, and it is an issue where the older I get, the more I realize that there are many unsolvable problems. And I think that's what we're starting to realize as a society, is that homelessness is a very difficult, if not outright unsolvable problem. You can throw money at it, but we've done that. We've thrown a lot of money at it, and it's the problem. I don't know if it exasperates the problem or if it just complicates the problem, but it's something that we have to grasp with. And I appreciate you answering that with me putting you on the spot, because I know you weren't expecting a question on homelessness, but there is overlap there, because like you said, even in the downtown core, I've heard from people, and not just in our market, but in other cities as well, that they didn't feel comfortable going downtown. That was one of the reasons that they didn't want to go downtown, was just because the homelessness was such a problem. And there's also a lot of homeless shelters that get located either on the fringe of an industrial park, or in some cases in an industrial park. And notwithstanding the human element of it, because I don't want to make it sound like this is just a cold business decision, but there are companies that don't want to locate in certain areas if there's a homeless shelter there. That doesn't become a humanitarian issue. That just becomes a business decision, where you can locate in two locations and one is next to a homeless shelter and one isn't. I think a lot of people are going to make that decision towards the latter. So it is
one of the areas that's exciting in this field to me is the research around how private industry and nonprofit providers can work together. What you said there, there's going to be opposition no matter where you put like social service facilities, because if you put it in an industrial area, then industrial users would be upset. But if you put it in a residential area, you're going to get a lot more calls. You're going to get a lot of calls. The same thing with downtown areas where major business transactions and investment decisions about putting huge bits of capital into the economy are being made blocks away from social service provision. So I mean, no matter where, you're going to find some opposition. Where I've seen some good examples is through some of our local providers here who are using federal loans, 50-year federal loans as their debt, and then also partnering, having equity partners. So if they've got if they know that the government will subsidize the rent of people who are close to being able to pay rent, they can pay 80% of rent or 70% of rent, and the government's willing to put in the other 30%, then you can have for-profit and not-for-profit housing in the same facility, in the same area. Or you can have just fully not-for-profit housing, but have a private equity partner that means that more projects can happen. And so we're exploring opportunities like that, so that we can, write papers on and create best practices in that area. And so we're at the beginning stages of that, but there are some exciting opportunities where you say, hey, look, what do we know how to do? We know how to construct buildings, and we know how to source capital. So we have some advantages here in this space where we can genuinely help. And so I hope that that's the best way that our industry can be used, I think, to solve these problems.
Yeah, great initiative. And I think that just speaks to the power of having an organization be on the advocacy side as opposed to anyone trying to do it themselves. There's just power that comes with that. So it's I wish you guys the best on that, because it is a troublesome problem. Obviously, from the standpoint of the people that are homeless, they're the first concern. But there's economic drawbacks, and there's pain inflicted on other people just through those externalities. So Godspeed. Hopefully you guys can figure that issue out, or at least contribute to it, to contribute to solving it. What other advocacy platforms are you guys pursuing on, more specific to either the industrial or commercial side?
On the commercial side is really exciting. We have a new zoning bylaw that'll broaden out and allow for a lot more uses. I think the city of Edmonton, I don't want to, I know not all of your listeners are here in the city of Edmonton, but the city of Edmonton deserves a real kudos. They've been real leaders in this area, completely rewriting the zoning bylaw. They'll rezone the entire city with their new zones, and it will allow for more dense development, faster development because of less change of use and less rezonings, because the development, the zoning would be like broader. So you might have a retail center that now by right allows for a 12-story tower in what was formerly used as parking. That was made possible a few years ago by the city of Edmonton removing our parking minimum standards, which is a project that NAIOP supported, which has allowed for change of use and redevelopment to be so much faster because now there is no minimum parking standard. The developer just has to essentially write a very brief synopsis of the other alternatives that are available, but there's no parking minimums, and anybody who's dealt with parking minimums knows what a nuisance they are, and how people were measuring the square footage of a sit down restaurant that stopped being a sit down restaurant a long time ago, and figuring out how many tables or chairs would be in that, and then figuring out how many people that would be if 2 people were in each car. And that's a crazy thing, but that's what most municipalities do. Edmonton's one of the first to get rid of it. Really exciting there. I'm really excited to do the new zoning bylaw. On the industrial side, our new industrial action plan is in its very beginning phases, but I think has this opportunity to increase the amount of services that are provided to industrial areas. So we see a big demand for things like transit to new industrial areas and existing industrial areas. But also there's that value side, but there's also, what's on the cost side. We're talking about taxes inside the city. Well, as happens in a lot of municipalities, and especially ours, where we're surrounded by other kind of relatively medium-sized municipalities, their taxes are lower. So industrial oftentimes goes out there. What we see from this new industrial action plan, hopefully, is either tax incentives or a way to use the taxes to upfront new industrial infrastructure. So developers build new industrial areas around here, and but you need the highway interchange, or you need the highway to go near the industrial area or be upgraded to have a turnoff. You need pipes and stormwater ponds, and those things are benefit to the entire area, not just to that one development. And so we feel that they're in Edmonton, they're shared amongst the developers as well as shared with the municipality. That can be kind of a complicated process. And so simplifying that process, smoothing it out, and making sure that the municipality is there at the very beginning, making an investment and saying where development should go. And then, but still allowing for private innovation, and for the market to say, hey, look, now we're building a different kind of product and we want it in a different area of the city, and still allowing for that is the kind of balancing act that I get really excited about, and gets into really minutia really quick, but that at the highest level, that's a really exciting area that Edmonton is again a leader on. Where we have a good balance of that now, and we are tweaking it to make sure that we have a great balance of that relative to other Canadian markets.
Do you keep track on what NAIOP as a collective organization is advocating on behalf of? Like I know in the States there was talk earlier last year about the 1031 perhaps being abolished, and that seems to have eased off. Are you keeping up the track on what the collective is going for from that advocacy standpoint?
Yeah, for the Canadians, the 1031 exchange is the idea that is a capital gains exemption. If you, as I understand it, if you sell one property and you buy another property, then you don't have to pay the capital gains on the first one. You can just kind of transfer your capital gains.
You roll it over, and there is a time limit on there too in the States.
Yeah, that's way oversimplified, but anyways, that's just to give anybody who doesn't know about it a context. We don't have that in Canada. It would be great if we had that in Canada. NAIOP in the States is that's a major area where NAIOP in the States is advocating. We're also talking about, we'll be in DC in 2 weeks, and we have a meeting of the Canadian chapters to talk about these kinds of municipal issues, and where we have common issues. They might not be federal issues, because the federal government is largely not in the commercial real estate space except for through taxation, capital gains. A lot of the work happens at the municipal level, and one of the things that I say at the beginning of every meeting now, any of our advocacy meetings, I talk about how real estate is the second largest industry in Canada. It's bigger than oil and gas, and it's bigger than manufacturing. That's an incredible statistic. It's the second largest industry in Canada, and so it deserves a level of advocacy. I mean, if we're in Alberta, if something happens in oil and gas, that their industry association cap is going to be on it, right? That's real estate generally is the second largest. Commercial real estate is a piece of that, maybe like a third of that in terms of the GDP. But it's all done at the municipal level. All the lobbying is done at the municipal level, and so what we're talking about with the other NAIOP chapters in Canada is, what are your common municipal issues, and where are some areas where we can work together to figure those out. So the issue of downtowns is one, safety and security downtown, cleanliness and maintenance downtown. What are the unique offerings that downtowns can offer, even as people have retreated more to living in the suburbs and wanting their community around them there. How are you attracting new industrial development is definitely one. And then what we're talking about with taxes, how are the different municipalities dealing with assessment and taxation issues there? And is there something we can learn? Because most municipal governments, by and large, operate in a vacuum, and then they deal with all the same issues. I'm sure anybody watching this has downtown disorder, a municipal government that wishes they could attract more investment into their municipality, and redeveloping retail centers and at least talk of office conversion, a glut of office space coupled with not enough housing options. Those are just common issues. They're threads that happen in every municipality, and we see our municipalities trying to deal with them in isolation. And I think there's things we can learn, especially because we're a small market. We can say, hey, these other big markets, Toronto and Vancouver, maybe they're 10 years ahead of us in terms of attracting new investment. So what do we want to see? What can we steal from them? And so those conversations are starting, and NAIOP's a good place to have them too.
Yeah, and that emphasizes another good point about looking into NAIOP, if people are curious, is you actually get to learn about a lot of issues that you might not have even known about. And also you get to learn about a lot of initiatives that are happening. And when I was involved in the tax file, I learned more about property taxes than I ever thought that I would have. But it was just by being immersed in that and getting to see what was going on, not necessarily behind the scenes, but definitely out of the public spotlight. That's traditionally a lot of the initiatives and advocacy things that groups like NAIOP are doing are not on the front page of the news. So a lot of that stuff, you really need to be in it to really understand what's going on.
Well, you should be recognized for getting into some real details. I don't know if your blogs from that time are still up, but you got into the minutia of it, and like you say, like it's not hidden, but it doesn't have a private side person looking at it. So you were showing, like, I remember reading the blog that said look at this real estate deal and evaluate it from any normal person's standpoint, where they sold a $50 million facility in order to build a $300 million facility across the street. And you go, I remember your blogs are really entertaining. I was rereading some of them recently, and the dollars per bus parking lot, or things like that, just evaluating with a private sector lens some municipal decisions from people who just don't have that same lens. I think there's an opportunity there, I guess, and so you deserve a lot of credit for bringing that stuff up and getting into it as much as you did, because you get out of it, like anything, you get out of it what you put in.
Yeah, I found it so fascinating, and I looked at it through the lens of a broker, but also an investor myself, where the buildings that our partnership group owns, we pay a lot in taxes. So I was looking at it through both perspectives on how much is actually going to it. And property tax is interesting from the standpoint that it's a tax that gets paid regardless of whether the company or whoever it is profitable or not. Where unlike federal tax or provincial tax, if you're a company that doesn't make money, you're not paying those taxes. If you're a company that doesn't make money, you're still paying those property taxes. So it's a lot bigger problem than I had originally anticipated. But I also kind of went down that rabbit hole of seeing that it does go to a lot of good things. And there's also a lot of people that are very passionate about projects, whether it's a new recreation center or some new program. So that's another thing. That's another very complex problem that I tended to treat it as black or white. Like you're for increases in property taxes, you're anti-property taxes. I found to be a lot more nuanced and a discussion that's much more complex. And you and I could talk about property taxes.
Oh, we could talk about property taxes all day. But you know what? I would leave just people with the thought that we shouldn't complain that municipal governments are involved in our industry, because you're further away you're always going to be further away from higher levels of government. And so people need to recognize our industry, real estate, is the second largest in Canada. I think it's similar in the States in terms of its impact on GDP. And nobody's going to do it unless we do it. And so you have an outsized impact to speak to your municipality. They really do respond to phone calls. I know you and I have done projects, Chad, and maybe people don't respond exactly the way you want them to, or whatever. But this is a level of government where you can genuinely, usually, still pick up the phone and get through to somebody, and that doesn't happen everywhere. So would encourage people to get involved in NAIOP chapters, but also just be involved in their community as it relates to commercial real estate.
That's a great point. I do want to end with some of the comments that came in. Wyatt, if we could just rapid fire pull those up. Harry, I grew up in Bay Area, and Oakland has historically been known for a pretty rough area. Lots of industrial buildings, and homeless there is insane. Yeah, thanks for the comment on that, Harry. I think that kind of echoes what we're saying. It is a problem on numerous fronts. Hopefully, as we normalize coming off COVID, we can, as a society, try and figure these issues out. It's just very complex, but thanks for the comments on that. Ron, YouTube #1 for long form. Twitter is so personal. Great point. Yeah, Ron's got a YouTube channel as well. Check out Ron's YouTube channel. He's an industrial real estate lawyer and investor. Great content on there. I can tweet and get a direct conversation with some heavy hitters. Yeah, I mean, Ron, you're selling Twitter as much as I'm selling NAIOP, so we should be getting some kind of either commission or affiliate link here with how much we're selling these things. Harry, hey, what's up, Ron? Love your content on industrial topics. I echo your commentary. What else do we got? Wyatt, anything else? John, thank you very much. thank you for expanding on.
It spells it out for us. So I like that.
We're like boomers in end.
Yeah, I was gonna put my glasses on to read that last one. Yeah.
Thanks for that, John. Do we have anything else? Okay, well, it's queuing that's it. Anand, I got your LinkedIn profile in the description, so I'd encourage people to reach out to you. Definitely check out NAIOP. It's just naiop.org, and reach out to Anand, reach out to myself. I'm always happy to share my experiences with it or give some recommendations where I think you can get some value out of it. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't like this video, smash that thumbs down button or leave us a comment. We're always looking for feedback either way. Thanks everybody for watching. Anand, thanks for your time as always.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye everyone.